Hello and welcome to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com, where we bring you news, insight and analysis on that most important of the least important things, football. I'm Ronan Murphy and I'm delighted to be joined by Robin Bairner, who is the chief editor of Football Transfers and the host of the Italian football podcast, Carlo Garganese. Welcome, guys.
Hi, mate. How's it going?
Thanks for having me, Ronan. I'm very excited.
You are most welcome. So, as you may know from previous episodes, that Robin is a Ligue 1 expert and Carlo claims to be a Serie A expert, and that's why he hosts the Italian Football Transfers podcast. So, or the Italian Football podcast. I can't even say that right.
That's correct.
Yeah, we'll get it right eventually. But we're obviously here this week. We're talking about the summer transfer window that has gone and closed, and whether the biggest clubs in Europe are better or worse after it. We'll have a look at the biggest signings from the summer, the big names that came and left at all the big clubs across the top 5 leagues, and we'll kind of assess whether that was good business or not. Because in the recent listener survey, which you remember we had, and Duncan and I talked about a lot, so one of the things that people wanted was more analysis of the transfers that have happened. So that's what we're here to give you. We'll just jump in with the biggest spenders, not the biggest net spenders. They always like saying. Liverpool, they spent €470 million this summer. They're Premier League champions last summer. So are they better this season? Are they going to win the league again? Let's jump in and see what Carlo thinks first of all.
Well, I think offensively they've got some unbelievable options in attack. I think the only question mark is defensively. I think they obviously wanted to get Mark Guehi, and they didn't manage to get him. So they've got Van Dijk and Konate. Konate is a little bit error prone. Van Dijk's getting a little bit older, and then their next option behind him is Lione, who they haven't. He's a fantastic young talent from Serie A, from Italy, but he hasn't even been given a minute yet. Or maybe they bring in Joe Gomez or someone like that. So I think that the question marks for Liverpool, are defensively over the course of the season, and usually defenses are important in winning titles. I would say they win titles like they did maybe 20 years ago, but having a strong defence is important, and Liverpool look like they might leak some goals this season.
Yeah, so the biggest names they brought in were obviously Alexander Isak, Florian Wirtz, Hugo Ekitike. So they have strengthened their attack really well. They brought in a couple of right backs, a couple of full backs, I should say. But, Robin, what do you think of Florian Wirtz and Hugo Ekitike so far? Because obviously Alexander Isak is yet to play in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, as Carlo mentioned, Liverpool's attack is absolutely formidable. It could go down as one of the best attacks in Premier League history when you look at the talent that's on display. I mean, we're talking about signings, but you're also throwing in existing players, and particularly Mo Salah, who's coming off the back of a stellar season. And obviously Dietmar Hamann a couple of weeks ago was questioning, is his age catching up on Salah. But they've brought in these younger, exciting players to couple with him. And I think we're going to see a really exciting Liverpool team this season. We've not seen it yet. Florian Wirtz obviously hasn't quite fired in the early weeks of the Premier League season as he might have wished to. He's yet to get a goal or an assist in the Premier League, and he doesn't look like he's entirely settled yet. But, we're talking about one of the best talents in the world. You're going to expect him to settle at some point. Hugo Ekitike has come in and he was signed for €80 million, which is a huge fee. But because of the other signings that Liverpool have made, you're looking at Isak and Wirtz in particular, there was perhaps less expected of him. And he's really hit the ground running. He's looked very sharp immediately. And he looks like he's going to be a major asset to Liverpool going forward. So Ekitike has certainly been the attacking signing who has really caught the eye so far. But we're waiting for Wirtz to explode. It's not happened yet, but it surely will.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like a lot of players take some time to settle into new leagues or to adapt to the changes of culture, of the pace of the league. Perhaps is a bit kind of different. Florian Wirtz isn't getting the same kind of space he would have had in the Bundesliga, but I think his talents are always evident, and it's just going to be a matter of time before he settles in, and that sometimes happens with with these sort of players. So we just have to wait and see. And will it happen, or will it be a massive bust? But only time will tell. It would be one of the most enormous busts ever. But when you look at the list of players who cost over 100 million, plenty of them have been. So Arsenal didn't quite spend 100 million this summer on an individual player, but they did spend a lot. And is this kind of Mikel Arteta's season where he needs to put his money where his mouth is and put his mouth where the money was spent? After 237 million of an outlay, they received just 8 million. So that's a net spend of minus 229 million. That is a massive money, or 229 million is the difference between how much they spent and taken in. And can Arsenal actually win the title this year, do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I think from what we've seen so far, absolutely Arsenal can win the title. They've obviously played 4 games in the Premier League at the time of recording, and they've won 3 of them. The one game they didn't win was away at Liverpool, the champions, and it took a magnificent free kick from Dominic Szoboszlai to decide that game. So from what we've seen of Arsenal, they absolutely can. They've brought in that striker in Victor Gyökeres, who is expected to be the spearhead who will lead them and score the goals. And he's settled quite nicely from what I've seen. I've been relatively impressed by him. There's been a number of big name signings up front. I'm sure we're going to go on and discuss the likes of Sesko as another one that springs to mind. But Gyökeres has started, much more impressively for my money. And Arsenal look in general just like quite a solid unit. We saw them bring in Christian Mosquera from Valencia, which I believe was 15 million euros. And he has already settled, really nicely. They're coming off the back of a Champions League match against Athletic Club on Tuesday night. And he seems to have settled really quickly into that Arsenal defence. He's looking like an absolute steal at that price. And he might prove to be one of the transfer bargains of the summer from what we've seen. So Arsenal look at a really solid unit. I don't think we're seeing the best of them yet. But, they've got a very complete team, and it looks like they're well set up to potentially go on and win the Premier League once again. Or, sorry, at last, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, Carlo said earlier that defences win leagues, and they used to win leagues anyway. And maybe that's what Mikel Arteta is doing, because he just keeps signing centre backs to fit all the roles. And with Hincapie after coming in on loan as well. So yeah, Arsenal, will they finally win the league? Who knows? But Chelsea have been big spenders across London, and they continue to spend big. They received 260 million in sales. They spent 326 million. It's ins and outs like nobody's business. So how did you view their summer?
It's the same as every summer under Todd Bowley. It's just, it's hard to really kind of understand what they're doing. How do you actually really build a winning team with so much change every single summer? Even if maybe the first team itself wasn't changed around so much, still the squad, there's a lot of change. But you know what? I think that this is, we're definitely seeing progress with Chelsea. You'd expect progress given all the money they've spent under Bowley, but we are seeing progress, starting to see progress at last under Todd Bowley at Chelsea. Of course, they won it's only the Club World Cup, but we saw them, what they did to PSG in the final. And this start of the season, they've shown some promise. I think enough promise to suggest that, they can have their say. Whether or not they're strong enough to win the league, probably not. I'm still not sure about their attack. I don't think they've got those guarantees in attack that, say, Liverpool certainly have. Even Man City with an Erling Haaland, you know what you're going to get from Erling Haaland. You know you're going to get 30, 40 goals a season. I don't feel like with any of those Chelsea players, we can sit here and say, right, these guys are going to get the goals, the numbers that are going to take Chelsea to win the title. But Champions League, I actually had them on my pod as a Champions League dark horse this season, because I think in the Champions League, against anyone, they can cause trouble. And if they go on a good run, good draw, who knows? But I don't think they'll win the league, but I think definitely they'll be top 4 again.
Yeah, they have the kind of makings of more of a cup team than a league team, and some of the signings kind of feed into that. I think the likes of Jamie Gittins, they come from Borussia Dortmund, Garnacho from Manchester United. I think those sort of players, they can be brilliant on their day, and then they can go through streets of maybe being kind of anonymous for a couple of games, and that doesn't win you leagues, but it could win you a cup trophy, or it could win you the Champions League if they step up at the right time. And Chelsea continue to make big money off sales. They're selling loads of players for medium amounts of money, and it seems to be working for Todd Bowley. This mill of players coming in, going out, it seems to continue to work for him. But yeah, he needs to win more than just the Club World Cup, because people will just point at that as a midsummer tournament rather than a significant trophy. And the Chelsea of old, we know that they were Champions League contenders and they won Champions League with Mourinho, etc. That they need to be able to do this again. And the Premier League looks much harder, especially with Man City strengthening again. Pep Guardiola continues to spend money, more and more and more money. So he spent over 200 million again this summer to receive just 85 million. The players that they sold Ederson, obviously. Their goalkeeper changed. They brought in James Trafford. He lasted a couple of weeks. Then they brought in Donnarumma. They even brought in Bettinelli. They've brought in 3 different goalkeepers. It just seems to be a summer of goalkeepers for Pep Guardiola.
Robin is the chief Donnarumma hater.
Yeah. So tell us all about Donnarumma and what to expect then, Robin, after his time at PSG.
Yeah, I was gonna mention when I was discussing Manchester City that Carlo was going to be a hard disagree on my opinions on Donnarumma. But he started well. I mean, what he did for PSG in the Champions League was undoubtedly class, and he was an undoubted difference maker in the Champions League. But for PSG, I just found him to be too erratic when he wasn't given a whole lot of work to do. So in the games at the start of the Champions League campaign that PSG ultimately won, Donnarumma made a string of errors, and fair enough, he's gone and erased these with his outstanding performances in the knockout rounds. But he is a goalkeeper who can make mistakes, and I believe he had a bit of a nightmare in Italy's recent match against Israel as well. So a lot of people are building him as the best goalkeeper in the world. I'm not entirely convinced by that, having watched him just about on a weekly basis last season. But undoubtedly for 30 million euros, he's a good signing. He's a strange signing for Manchester City because of his known weaknesses with his feet. But at the same time, he's not a complete disaster in that regard. But it's an interesting pickup for Manchester City because it's not really what you would expect of them.
Go on, Carlo. Defend your Italian hero.
I agree that I'm surprised that Pep Guardiola went for him, knowing that Pep Guardiola has been this kind of the godfather of the whole, using the goalkeeper, using his feet to start attacks and everything. So in that respect, I am surprised. I think that, I don't think he's not going to have that much to do for City, because I don't think this is the same City team as in previous years. It's not. And I think if we're talking about the transfer market, certainly the January transfers, I remember Robin saying at the time that this is really strange business in January. And then this summer, how strong is their overall business this summer? I think Reinders, I've watched a lot of him in Serie A, really talented player, really, really fantastic player, but some can be a bit inconsistent, can be a bit up and down. So I think he actually will have a lot to do, actually. And we even saw that on his debut against Man United, where he made an incredible, incredible save. But I think that with Donnarumma, he's definitely the best shot stopper in the world. Like, no, people can't make the saves that he makes are saves that other goalkeepers can't make. And I think actually there's a stat going around that over the last, I think it's 3 years, nobody has a better goals saved, like numbers of goals saved based on expected goals than Donnarumma. So he's obviously a goalkeeper that makes incredible saves. Is he the perfect goalkeeper? No, because he's he's not strong with his feet, and also he's also a bit suspect on cross set pieces, and that's something that he will be tested at in the Premier League. But then again, I just want to say one final thing. Name me a goalkeeper that doesn't make mistakes. I hear that it's a bit of a cliche in football. I think, he's got a mistake in him. I think all goalkeepers have got mistakes in him. You know, name a keeper and he's got a mistake in him, I think.
Caoimhín Kelleher, no mistakes whatsoever. Never seen him make a mistake for Ireland. No, we'll erase all those long-range goals if teams scored against us. They'd never happen. Another team with goalkeepers and making mistakes was across the city in Manchester. Man United decided, they've had enough of Onana, so they decided to bring in a Layman's, who was mentioned by Duncan on the podcast, and they didn't even start him then after signing him. So who knows what's going on in the goalkeeper position at Manchester United? Knows what's going on anywhere at Manchester United? But they invested a lot of money. They spent over 200 million just on forwards alone. Are these forwards any good? Is the question I want to ask. And Carlo, you are smiling there, so because it seems clear that you want.
It's like what we were just saying about guarantees. And I think that's the way that if you're spending that amount of money, you expect to buy. No one's a guarantee. Like we've seen some big name players, established players flop at Man United and other clubs as well. But I think that spend that amount of money on Emblemo, Cunha. It's a lot of money. Even Sesko, I can kind of see that he's up and coming, but even Sesko is not it's too much money spent on players where you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit. And that's the issue that I had with Man United's transfer business this summer.
I can see Ronan frowning when you said even Sesko. So I would like to hear Ronan's opinion on Manchester United signing Sesko for €76.5 million.
Well, regular listeners to the podcast and viewers on the podcast will know from me talking before anybody signed Sesko when Duncan and I were talking about him arriving in the Premier League. There were different teams being interested in him. You were like, you can see why they're interested in him because he has a huge potential. He has kind of skills, but then he has a terrible decision making, I would say. He is terrible under pressure. Terrible is a word that I've said twice to describe him. So that is not a good sign. But as you can see, has he been trusted by Man United yet? He hasn't started every game, which is a disgrace for a 76.5 million striker. He wasn't trusted to take any of the first 9 penalties in the shootout against Grimsby. This is a player.
Presumably there he didn't trust himself though, because if you're a centre forward at Manchester United and you're in a penalty shootout against Grimsby, for goodness sake, you're surely putting yourself forward to take one of the early penalties. And it's certainly before the 10th penalty. I mean, it was only Onana on the night that didn't take a penalty before him. So, I mean, what does that say about Sesko as being somebody who's willing to shoulder any sort of responsibility at any sort of level, let alone a club like Manchester United? It's just a huge red flag for me.
Yeah, I think it's just red flags all around for Man United. So they'll be getting the green and yellow scarves back to replace those red flags in another few weeks, probably when these signings don't work out too well. Other teams that spent big this summer in the Premier League, we probably should have a quick look. Newcastle, Spurs, anybody come to mind that you thought had good business in the Premier League?
Not Newcastle. I thought they had a horror window. They missed out. They lost Isak and they lost pretty much every main target they wanted. They missed out on. You will know a bit more about Walter, mate. Actually would like to know your opinion on just how good you think he could become. But Tottenham's business, I actually was quite impressed with. You mentioned Tottenham there. I actually think they brought in some good players, and they've started well. And they seem to, when you do business, it has to marry together with your coach. That you have to be able to play for the system and work for your coach. And I think maybe with Tottenham, that seems to have been, so far, it's early days, seems like they're his kind of players as well.
Yeah, I think Spurs have put together a couple of smart loan signings and signing Kolo Muani and Paulinho. I think they're good loan signings. Kudus, I'm a huge fan of. I think he's a wonderful player. And obviously, Premier League proven, if you want to say that. I'm a little bit concerned about Xavi Simons, though. I just feel like we're talking about red flags with Sesko. I think in terms of his attitude. I'm interested to see how he goes at Spurs. We've obviously seen him at PSG kind of throw a strop and fall out with the manager. It doesn't sound like he had a particularly good relationship at RB Leipzig at the end as well. So, he seems to be a player who's quite good when everything's going his way and everything's happy. But is he able to dig in and kind of show some mental fortitude when it's more difficult? I'm interested to see what might happen then.
Yeah, I think he's the kind of player that maybe Tottenham might suit him, because he's going to be the star man there rather than just a bit part player, like he might have been had he signed for some of the other clubs that were linked with him. And I think if he does get to be the star man, then he will be confident and he will be happy, and then he'll be a different sort of player, and we'll actually see him being a success. So yeah, we'll see how that one goes. As for Voltemada, I think he would be a great addition to Newcastle. He's obviously not going to be Alexander Isak, who is, and his fee is astronomical. I would not have paid that for him, but he does have the skills to be a high goal scorer for Newcastle, score a lot of goals for Newcastle. We've seen it already in the Premier League even. He's only one of a few kind of Germans to score on their debut. Jurgen Klinsmann was another one in the Premier League. So if he could be anywhere near as good as Klinsmann, it would be an incredible signing for him. But he is a player who, he mightn't have all the tools that you want from your number 9, but he has the most important one, which is scoring goals. He's well able to score goals and he's a good finisher. So if Newcastle can create a chance for him, he will be a success. And yeah, another team that I really didn't like, because Carlos said he didn't like Newcastle summer, I really didn't like what Aston Villa have done in the window this summer. I know PSR has a lot to answer for there, but they just look a weaker team than last year. And I think that's the case with some of the teams across Europe, which we're going to focus on next in the show, that they don't look stronger. But you look at the teams above them, the likes of Arsenal, Liverpool, etc. A lot of them looks like stronger teams, but there are a lot of teams who look weaker this summer after the transfer window. And is PSG one of them, Robin? Because they are European champions, but looking at the money they spent and who they brought in, it's kind of like two players, and they spent over 100 million. They received 85, or they received 65 million. Oh wait, is it 85 million? I need better eyesight, and maybe I need to turn the light on it here. But yeah, Donnarumma was a lot of their income this summer. So yeah.
Well, they downgraded at goal. They definitely downgraded at goalkeeper, didn't they, Roman?
Let's not go there. I think Chevalier is going to be an interesting one, because obviously there's so much expectation on him now, having replaced Donnarumma and also cost more than Donnarumma. And he's the sort of goalkeeper that is capable of shouldering that sort of burden. He's not instantly as good as Donnarumma, but there is a potential for him to become as good and certainly to become one of the best in the world. And as you mentioned, Ronan, that PSG really haven't done a whole lot of business. Even in terms of losing players, the players that they've allowed to go are more or less squad players, but they've done relatively well there. They've got a number of high earners off their books. Asensio, for example, was their third highest earner, and now he's gone. So the wage bill's been cut quite dramatically, which is very important for them. And in terms of their incomings, the only really major signing that they've made, aside from Chevalier, is Barnier from Bournemouth. They wanted that additional centre-back. He is going to be the player who ultimately is the heir to Marquinhos, who remains the captain, but is an ageing force and perhaps something of a fading force as well. He was something of a weak link in the Champions League winning team, and is a player that they will ultimately look to move on in the relatively short-term future. But for PSG, it's really just been about trying to maintain what they've got and try to maintain the momentum from last season. And they've managed to do that. But what will be interesting is if they suffer injuries, and they've already started to suffer injuries, because Doué, Dembele, and Kvaratskhelia are all likely to miss tonight's match against Atalanta in the Champions League. And it's going to be interesting to see how their depth is tested, because it wasn't really last season. Luis Enrique managed to juggle his squad quite effectively and avoid any sort of physical problems. Now they've got these problems. How are they going to cope with them? Do they have the squad depth to cope? They're going to have to call on a lot of younger players, but they've got a very strong academy, and they're giving these players like Seni Mayulu and Ibrahim Mbaye the opportunity to step up now. So it's a show of faith in their academy, but it's also a risky strategy because they are lacking obvious depth in their first team squad.
Yeah, that's probably a strategy they didn't use in the past, and we saw a lot of kind of players leave PSG and go on to be stars elsewhere. Xabi Simon's maybe one of them that we mentioned, but there have been loads of kind of players who come through PSG and didn't get a chance. So maybe this focus on youth could be good for them, especially considering maybe the relative strength of the rest of Ligue 1 this season. Looking at Lyon and Marseille, Lyon definitely received nearly 4 times as much as they spent, and Marseille kind of broke even this summer. So it wasn't a big summer of spending in France, was it, Robin?
Not particularly, no. I think there was only 4 teams that actually had a net spend, and French football at the moment is suffering from a television crisis in terms of revenue. They had an agreement in place a couple of years ago that ultimately fell through, and they've been scrambling to find a solution ever since then. And the knock-on effect's been quite profound, and it's something that we're seeing the effects of at the moment. And perhaps there's been no club that's suffered more than Lyon, because before the summer we all heard about the prospect of them potentially being relegated on an administrative basis because they didn't have the funds to guarantee their survival for the season. Ultimately, they've managed to kind of wriggle their way out of that, but that's involved a lot of major sales. A lot of their biggest players in terms of wages and also quality have departed. We've seen Alexander Lacazette go, but perhaps the most important is Ryan Cherki, who's moved to Manchester City. Now, he's a guy who's extremely talented. He's Lyon born and bred, and a player that they would have really wished to keep hold of, but it just wasn't possible, and they've had to sell him for a relative bargain price. And if you want to talk about Marseille, I would say Marseille have probably strengthened over the summer, and I think we saw a relatively strong performance from them against Real Madrid last night. They were a little bit unfortunate to lose to a controversial Kylian Mbappe penalty quite late in the game. They've spent relatively heavily in Ligue 1 terms, notably signing Igor Paschal from Feyenoord and Naif Agard from West Ham. But their aim is going to be, can they get closer to PSG? Now, if PSG struggle in terms of injury problems, and Marseille do certainly have the potential to get closer to them, it's just going to be a case of, do they have the consistency to get as close to them? And then that's always been a problem with Marseille, particularly playing away from home. It does look like it's going to be PSG's league to win once again, though.
Yeah, they have local rivals though this season. It's interesting to see Paris FC have returned to Ligue 1, and yeah, it's nice to see a derby like that back in France, because maybe there's not too many of them, and I know Germany doesn't have one in the Bundesliga because Hertha and Union Berlin, the capital city teams, aren't in the same division, so it's good to have a capital derby back. But our Paris FC actually trying to make waves, because it seems like they've received €0 in sales, and they've spent nearly 50 million, so they must be trying to do a Wrexham, is it, on France at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, very much so. Paris FC are certainly a team to watch. They've partnered with Red Bull, so they're not a Red Bull team, but they're in that sort of sphere of clubs, and their owners are extremely rich. They own the Louis Vuitton fashion brand, for example, and they've managed to sign Kevin Trapp, allegedly, by offering him modelling rights with Louis Vuitton when he ends his career.
That's
I believe.
How we got Carlo on the podcast today.
Love that.
So yeah, I mean, they're certainly a team that are making waves. You talked about them being a local rival to PSG. They've moved stadium, so they are literally right next door to PSG at the moment, literally within spitting distance. It's literally across the road. It's really quite remarkable. So it's Duncan's probably not here this week because he's in the huff that Dundee United is no longer the closest rivalry in European football. So yeah, I mean, they've spent a lot of money in terms of Ligue 1 terms. They've mostly recruited from within Ligue 1, but they've recruited players who are strong and up and coming. Moses Simon from Nantes, probably one of the most notable of those. But equally, they've signed Otavio from Porto, the centre back, for €17 million, which is a huge statement of intent from a Ligue 1 team that's really up and coming, because the average Ligue 1 team just can't afford to spend that sort of money. So the fact that you've got a new club coming in and being willing to splash that sort of cash is really quite exciting. And they're also trying to tap into the market in in Paris of fans who can't afford to go to PSG. So they've set their season ticket prices low, sold around 10,000 season tickets, I believe, which is a massive uptake on last year. So they're certainly a club to keep an eye on and just watch how they develop over not just the coming season, but over the coming 4 or 5 years. It's going to be exciting.
Let's see if they can sign their own Messi and Neymar in a few years and become the Paris club and knock PSG out of it. Moving to Italy, where Carlo has been dying to tell us all about Juventus' big summer. But if I go in alphabetical order, Inter before Juventus, so I'll start with them. So I'll get warmed up before he starts fanning about Juventus.
Yeah, Inter fans are really not happy at the moment, and they've had a bad start to the season. They've lost 2 of their opening 3 games, including to Juventus, in an absolutely insane match on the weekend. They lost 4-3. Inter is strange. It's a strange one. They started the transfer window with the aim of trying to lower the age of the team. Very old team that got to the Champions League final, a team that looked old in that Champions League final when PSG destroyed them 5-0. The aim was to bring in younger players, but players with a bit more pace, a bit more intensity, some players that could sort of like dribble and take their players on, which were some qualities that were missing from their team. And they started the window quite well. They brought in Ange Boni, was one of the best youngsters in Serie A from Parma. Then they brought in Peter Sucic, who's one of Croatia's best kind of young talents in midfield. And it looked like things were starting well. Then they tried to bring in Ademola Lookman from Atalanta. That became, they didn't end up bringing him in, and it's led to, we might get to it after, like a big war between Atalanta and Lookman, very ugly. And then Inter never really, they never really recovered from that failure to buy Lookman, and they made a strange signing. Robin might know more about him, Andy Dieu, for 25 million, who they've not even given a minute to, they don't seem to trust. And then Luis Enrique also came in from Marseille. They bought him for 25 million. He's barely been given a chance, so they don't seem to trust him. Obviously, spent 50 million on 2 players who it looks like are not even in the plans of the manager. And the team still seems to have the same issues as last season. They're old. There's a bit of a lack of motivation, a lack of hunger. And Inter fans are not really confident that they can launch a Scudetto challenge this season. It looks like there's something not quite right within the squad. And the biggest thing of all is they have a manager, Christian Kivu, who's a complete novice, who replaced Simone Inzaghi, who went to Saudi Arabia. And so they've got a coach with big question marks over the coach, and he's already under pressure because of these early losses.
So what can we expect from this Diouf that never plays, Robin?
Well, not very much if he's not in the park, can we? Yeah, he's a France under-21 international. He's come from Lens in Ligue 1. He's a sort of typical Lens midfielder. I mean, they've got a reputation for having sort of really athletic, combative midfield players, and they've typically produced these guys. And I think that's what you can expect from him. A lot of energy, a lot of combativity, hard tackles, but equally he's relatively solid on the ball. I was quite surprised to see him go to a team of the stature of Inter, but he's a player that was certainly capable of playing for a better team than Lens, for example. He's a team that's a player who could play for a Champions League team. So I imagine he'll eventually have a relatively strong squad role to play. Luis Enrique, on the other hand, who moved for I think 28 million euros, he is a player who's got great stats, looks good, but then you watch him and you're just trying to wonder what he's producing. And he was always linked to big clubs last year, and I was watching Marseille and just trying to work out why. So I was very surprised that Inter went for him. I was surprised by the links with big clubs, to be honest. So I'm not particularly shocked to hear that he's not made an impact there so far.
That's Luis Enrique with a H, in case
It
anyone's
is, yes.
wondering. Luis Henrique. So not the Luis Enrique you might be used to hearing about. He has not come out of retirement to play for Inter this season, despite the age of their squad being forever old. But Juventus, have they tried to sign youthful players? Have they tried to sign good players, Carlo? I know you, as a avid Juventus fan, will have a lot to say on this time.
Well, Juventus did nothing at all during the transfer window up until the closing days, even hours of the market, other than bring in Jonathan David on a free transfer from Lille, and that was really all they'd done. And then in the closing hours, they kind of rescued their market a little bit. They were going to bring in Randall Kolo Muani, who had a successful 6 months on loan from PSG at the end of last summer and was really pivotal in them actually getting in the top four. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have made it. And he was really, really good. And the plan was to sign him. But the negotiations with PSG just went on and on and on. And PSG were playing real hardball over the fee. They were demanding a certain fee, sort of like around 60 million euros. And in the end, and PSG got very upset about this. In the end, Juventus decided to pull the plug on the deal with a few days of the window to go. And they decided to go for Luis Openda instead, and brought him in for less money, I think more around about the 40, 45 mark. Then used that remaining money to bring in Zegrova from Lille as well. And so kind of got two players for the price of what would have been one. PSG really angry and upset about it. Apparently, like they don't want to do business with Juventus anymore now because of this. Al Khalifi's delivered one of his, he doesn't want to do business with Juventus anymore. And so anyway, so they ended the market bringing in a couple of interesting names there, and they've started the season well. They've won all three of their Serie A games. They drew 4-4 at Borussia Dortmund in the most insane second half of football I think I've ever seen. And they're a flawed team, though, Juventus. I don't see them winning the Scudetto. I think they should be fine for top four. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. They've got good spirit. They've got Yildiz, who's just a magical player who's going to be a superstar, I think.
Yeah, check out his goal against Dortmund if you haven't seen it. A wonderful goal.
Amazing goal, yeah. So I think they're going to be an interesting team to watch, but I still think that there's too many flaws in the team for them to be, win the Scudetto and to go deep in the Champions League.
Good stuff, Carlo. Get the excuses in early, so then you don't have to worry about it in the second half of the season. Milan look to be one of the busiest teams in the window. They spent 158 million. They brought in 169 million, so they had huge change. It's a totally different kind of Milan we should expect in 2025-26.
Yeah, and a new manager, Max Allegri, my old friend. Revolution at Milan. Just sort of Chelsea-like, the number of players in and out this summer. And they've actually, if you've watched their first three games of the season, even though they lost the opening game against Cremonese, they've actually looked quite good. They look quite efficient. And they've looked, considering they're out of Europe and they don't have any European football they can play once a week. Yeah, they're a team. I think they're a team that, if everything comes together, could potentially be a surprise Scudetto challenge. If we can ever call Milan a surprise Scudetto challenge, given the size of the club. But Luka Modric is obviously the big one, coming in a free transfer, and he's just turned 40 last week. And he scored the winner at the weekend against Bologna as a 40-year-old, which I think he makes him in the top 5 or top 6 oldest scorers ever in Serie A. And honestly,
I didn't think he'd crack the top 40, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. There are older though. Zlatan was older. Billy Costa Curta, remember him? He was older. They were both 41 when they scored in Serie A. But yeah, he's been amazing so far, especially in that game of the weekend against Bologna. He's just run the show. I know you lot are just going to start making fun now of Serie A being an old league, and that's why he's doing it. But honestly, like the energy, it was not just that controlled the game. We know he's amazing even now, technically, in the way that he runs the game. But the energy he showed, like he was pressing, he looked like the guy with the fittest player on the pitch. even in the latter stages of the game. So if Modric keeps playing like this, Rabiot's come in as well, who's still obviously, he's a serviceable player in midfield. Rafael Leao, once he's back from injury, Nkunku has come in from Chelsea. I mean, if Leao and Nkunku can hit it off together, especially the Nkunku that we saw at Leipzig, they could be a bit of a danger. Their defense doesn't look very strong, but it's Serie A, and we're talking about levels here. They could be an interesting one, Milan, this season.
Carlo's going to have Adrian Rabiot's mother on the phone in the next hours after calling him just merely serviceable.
He actually had a really good debut, actually.
You're in a whole lot of trouble. You're in a world of pain, Carlo.
Yeah, I turn your phone on silent now and just ignore calls for the rest of the day. So, so if Milan are challengers but not going to win, Juventus aren't going to win, is it Napoli or Roma that's going to win Serie A this season, or whose summer was so good we should expect them to
not
be lifting
Roma.
the title next year?
Yeah, not Roma. Roma could be potentially could break into that top four. We'll have to see. They've got the big one is they've got Gianpiero Gasperini, obviously the legend of Atalanta, who's created this Atalanta miracle. He left them eventually after 9 years, gone to Roma, but the sporting director Federico Massara said, "Look, we can't do everything in one summer. It's a work in progress." And I think that's where Roma are. They can't do everything in one summer. So I think that they can maybe fight for top four, but they're not. They definitely won't be a Scudetto challenger. As for Napoli, I think that they're, from what we've seen so far this season, they're looking like really strong favourites. From what I've seen so far, they look like a team that are not only going to win the Scudetto, but win it quite comfortably. And I think the only thing that can stop them is if Antonio Conte, historically, has always, for me, Antonio Conte is the best manager in the world, one competition a week. No doubt about that for me. League football. But where Conte has struggled is when he's had to marry together European football with league football and play twice a week. He's never been good at rotating and managing the squad, the training, the physical side of the game. And that's had a knock-on effect in the league. That's the only thing that I can see stopping Napoli, because they look so good. Their midfield is cut above the rest in Serie A. Conte's actually managed to work out a way to fit in all four of his top central midfielders in the same team. Kevin De Bruyne, obviously the big free transfer from Man City, together with Scott McTominay, Anguissa and Lobotka. He's actually worked a system to get them all playing together in this kind of 4-4-1-1 with McTominay starting on the left and coming inside. And it's been super effective. And even with Lukaku injured out till December, which is a big blow, and they brought in Rasmus Højlund. He was great on his debut. I mean, this Man United disease again of players leaving Man United and being great elsewhere. McTominay last year. This year, Højlund's already started really, really well. And they brought in a lot of players. They've sorted out the depth of their squad, which was a problem. They brought in Boukma from Bologna, who scored on his debut as well. They brought in Gutierrez from Girona. They've signed Noah Lang from PSV. The depth of the squad is really impressive this season. Milinkovic-Savic, the goalkeeper, has come in as well. So they've got great depth. It seems like they can handle playing in two competitions. I think that they're strong favourites for the Serie A this season.
Carlo, did you just put forward Rasmus Højlund as a nominee for the Ballon d'Or next year?
Well, McTominay is. So you wouldn't rule it out. Listen, it's Man United. Like, honestly, like in the Italian media have been ripping to shreds Man United. Even Conte mocked Man United in his post-match interview after the 3-1 win at Fiorentina at the weekend when Højlund scored, and he was asked about Højlund, and he says, "Oh, we signed Højlund because clearly Man United seem to bring us good luck. The players that leave them come to us, but that is Man United." Even Onana, didn't Onana have like a clinic, like 29 shots, and he was man of the match for Trabzonspor? I mean, so it makes you think, like, Man United. You sign Man United players, and they become different players.
This narrative is not going to help the listeners and viewers that think that we're strong against Man United. We need to get someone pro Man United on the next episode. So that'll sort things out.
Well, Garnacho had a terrible debut for Chelsea, didn't he? So there we go.
He was involved in the goal before the equaliser, so he had different kind of statuses at each end of the pitch. I think we'll have to. That's another one. We'll have to wait and see. Moving on to Spain, Real Madrid, obviously, as always, were one of the biggest spenders. They weren't the biggest spenders. Atletico Madrid were the biggest spenders, but they had the biggest net spend, 147 million, and Trent Alexander-Arnold added 10 million to that before the Club World Cup, as we all know. But yeah, they look. Do they look a better team this season? I don't know if they do, but Kylian Mbappe is scoring lots of goals, and is that fine? Are we finally seeing the best of Mbappe, Rob?
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult to see the very best of Mbappe at Real Madrid while he's playing as a centre forward. I personally prefer him off the left, but Xabi Alonso knows a lot more about football tactics than I do, so
no, he doesn't.
I'm going to bow to his expertise there. But you mentioned, do Real Madrid look like a better team? For me, they look tactically much better. They look much more united. There looks like much more of a structure around them. I've only watched them a couple of times, but they impressed me last night again when they played Marseille. I thought they looked very cohesive. The press was, really united. It was very strong. There were echoes of what we saw at Bayer Leverkusen with Alonso. So for me, Real Madrid do look very solid. Alvaro Carreras was perhaps the standout of the signings. Obviously, Trent went off injured after just a few minutes, and it looks like he's going to be out for maybe up to a couple of months, which will be a blow to them. But Carreras really impressed me in terms of his pressing and his overall influence of the game. So I hadn't seen an awful lot of him, and I'm sorry to go back to another Man United player who's doing well away from the club, but here's one here. Obviously went to Benfica first, but he's come to Real Madrid and is already looking very sharp. And they've recruited Dean Huysen to strengthen their defence, which was a major problem last year. He seems to have settled in pretty well. So I think things are looking really good for Real Madrid at the moment.
Barcelona then didn't spend too much money, as always. They have too many levers to pull to get players, to register players. Marcus Rashford was a big arrival. Joan Garcia was able to be registered after Marc-Andre ter Stegen decided or confirmed that he was actually injured after all. Atletico Madrid, then they have spent 176 million this year. Are either of these teams capable of toppling Real Madrid, do you think, Carlo?
Atletico, I can't see it. I don't think I wasn't super impressed by Atletico Madrid's transfer market, to be honest, and they haven't had the best start to the season either. So I don't see Atletico. I don't. I think Madrid and Barcelona look like they've got too much firepower, too much quality through their team. As for Barcelona, absolutely. I mean, Barcelona was so impressive last season, especially in the Champions League, and with Yamal. They've just got such a special talent there. As long as he's fit, obviously it's been a bit of a big kind of war that's ongoing at the moment between Barcelona and the Spanish Football Federation over him playing with this groin injury and having painkilling injections. That's the only concern that I have for Barcelona. Like if they were to get, if Yamal was to get a major injury, I think he just raises the level of the team so much, and he's just a catalyst, and he's such a special player. So if something was to happen to him and he was out, then that might, but this Barcelona team, they look like going forward, obviously incredible teams. It's going to be a really exciting title race. Honestly, it is. It's going to be fantastic between these two teams, going blow to blow all season. It's a hard one to call, isn't it? That Barcelona-Madrid title race this season.
Or isn't a hard title race to call, and people will say it's Bayern Munich going to win the Bundesliga again. Bayern Munich spent 72 million this summer, which wasn't the most of by far of any team in the Bundesliga. I don't think they had a great window, to be honest. To Luis Diaz, interesting signing, and obviously they got money back for Telf. The Tottenham Coman has left as well, but they didn't have too busy of a summer. Thomas Muller has gone to MLS to play for Vancouver. I think this Bayern Munich team, they'll run away with the Bundesliga, but that's because the rest of the teams just look worse after the summer, and I'm not sure they're going to get any further than the semi-finals or maybe even the quarter-finals of the Champions League. They just don't look as good a team, because if anything happens to Harry Kane, there's nobody behind him. Nicholas Jackson has come in, but we'll kind of wait and see. There are already problems with him because Uli Hoeneß has said that the obligation is impossible to reach. He has to start a ridiculous amount of games that Bayern Munich probably won't even play this season. So, yeah, that's not going to end well for them. Uli Hoeneß, he always has lots of power at the club. He rightly does, because he is the man who kind of masterminded why they're so good, or such a big club and such a successful club. But yeah, maybe he sometimes should keep his opinions and keep what's actually happening behind the scenes to himself. So FC Hollywood maybe might come back a bit and make things entertaining. But Bayern Munich, they're going to win the Bundesliga by miles. This could be a season where they win it in February or March. This could be one of those seasons, because Borussia Dortmund, they spent nearly 100 million. They received 72 million. Are they any better? Who knows? Niko Kovac was brilliant at the second half of last season. He helped them get into Champions League when they looked like they were not going to get into Europe at all. They're more defensively sound, except when they're playing Juventus in the Champions League, of course. But midfield, Joe Bellingham, he's not Joe Bellingham, to be honest, is he? And yeah,
has he not been good so far?
He hasn't been. He's been in and out of the team so far, and then there was a big problem with the team where he was taken off, and his father decided to make a scene in the tunnel after, and then family and friends are now banned from the tunnel.
Another
and the
pushy
dressing
parent.
room. Yeah.
Is he going to join our? I think on Football Transfers, did we ever do that article on the pushy parents, like top 5 pushy parents?
Yeah, no, that just sounds like problematic. Your phone will definitely be ringing for the rest of the week if that happens. So we'll steer clear of that one. And the other team that made big money moves, spent the most money in the Bundesliga this season, was Bayer Leverkusen, and it's no surprise they spent nearly 200 million, because they've made 233 million. Because they sold Florian Wirtz, Jeremy Frimpong, Amin Adli went from the club, Hincapie went even on loan to Arsenal, Granit Xhaka's gone. The whole team looks totally different this season. The manager's already been changed. Eric Ten Hag set a record for the Bundesliga, the quickest new manager ever sacked in Bundesliga history to start the season. So yeah, they've got in a new coach that they claimed they wanted all along. So yeah, things don't look rosy at Bayer Leverkusen at the moment. They did look a small bit improved over while under the new Danish boss Hjulmand at the weekend, but yeah, so much transition has happened there. They will not challenge. Frankfurt, Stuttgart, etc. They all sell their best strikers. So yeah, just bet on Bayern Munich if you're going to bet on Bayern Munich every week to win every game in the Bundesliga. And yeah, we'll move on, because it has not been a great summer for German football, it pains me to say. Yes, so that kind of wraps up the big 5 leagues. Thanks to Carlo and Robin for joining me. But as always, we have Duncan's favourite part of the show. It's hero and villain. So Robin is going to choose the hero this week, and he has a very special pick out here.
I do, yes. I think there's only one person this can be, and I think anybody who watched the Champions League last night will appreciate this. And my hero is Carlo for the week, because anybody who knows Carlo will know how much of a jinx he is when commentating on football. And at halftime last night, the WhatsApp group goes saying Juventus are now worse to watch under Tudor than they were under Max Allegri. And Carlo is really not a fan of Max Allegri, so this was a massive insult from him. But thankfully, he managed to jinx into existence somehow from what I understand was a terrible, terrible game of an 8-goal second half. So I think anybody who watched that game should really be paying a massive debt of thanks to Carlo for giving them probably the best 45 minutes of the season.
Thank you, Carlo. Well, what were some of your other historic jinxes that you've been so bad it's good?
I've had quite a few in our WhatsApp group, but to be fair, Robin's had a lot, and also, but I'm not as bad as Martin McDonald, who is.
No, I don't know about that, mate. I'm afraid. I think you're the worst.
Yeah, so
I do it deliberately sometimes. If my team's losing, I do it deliberately to try and jinx them
normally
to
works,
win.
to be fair.
Yeah. Just keep doing what you're doing, Carlo. We all appreciate it. Yeah. So, Carlo, who is your villain of the week?
Okay, my villain of the week is just the Serie A, the Liga Serie A, basically. So anybody that listens to my pod will know that I'm very critical of anything
Everything
to do with the Serie A in terms of organisation, and especially marketing, anything commercial. They're just so bad at it. But in particular, with regards to selling Serie A TV rights, Robin mentioned earlier about the crisis in French football with TV rights. It's the same in Italian football. Every year, every rights cycle that comes along, Serie A seems to lose more and more countries, more and more territories that are not buying Serie A TV rights. And those that they are selling, they're selling to broadcasters who are incapable of putting on a good service. For example, in India last season, they sold it to this website that wasn't even set up and didn't even last barely half a season before it went bust, and they didn't have it. So like these kind of examples, basically. Well, anyway, so this year, this summer, Serie A failed to sell TV rights to a bunch of countries in Asia. And so instead, what they did is they announced last week, I think it was on Friday or Saturday, they announced that they were going to show the games for free on YouTube in these countries. And that included India and a bunch of other countries in that territory. And so the first game of the weekend in Serie A was played on Saturday, and halfway through the match, they decided to pull the stream of the games on YouTube, delete all the future upcoming streams that were advertised, and also delete the announcement that the games were going to be shown on YouTube. So that was at half time of the match. The match, I'm forgetting now which match it was. It was the first game of the weekend. It was Saturday afternoon, and they deleted everything. And the reason why was because what happened was that people all around the world started using VPNs to watch the games for free on YouTube in the Asian territories. So it didn't occur to them before they did this that might actually happen. So now the people in these territories, including India with a population of 1.5 billion and a huge Serie A fan base, are back to not being able to watch Serie A. And remember that the slogan of Serie A is piracy is say no to piracy, that piracy is killing Serie A. So it just sums up just what a farce the Serie A is and how badly run the league is.
So what you're saying is what Serie A needs in these is a Carlo Garganese watch along, just like the Bundesliga is doing this season.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I've given up now, honestly. But it's not just a Serie A problem. Like as Robin will tell you with Liga, like I'm sure Robin, every single rights cycle, every single year, Liga is losing more and more territories. There's more and more countries that are not showing Liga. And that's a huge, huge problem. And it just adds to the whole dominance of the Premier League that all these other major leagues are not even able to sell their TV rights. And I'm not just going to blame the Serie A for that. Yes, the Serie A are horrendous. They haven't got a clue what they're doing. But it's also, there's just a lack of interest in these other leagues now, which is really worrying. And it just means that the Premier League gets more and more powerful and becomes more and more the Super League. And I'm sure it happens to the Bundesliga, Ronan, and I'm sure it will happen to La Liga as well.
Yeah, I do think that kind of ties into what we've been talking about for the last hour or so. The money spent by the Premier League, over 3 billion, kind of dwarfs all the rest of the leagues combined nearly this summer. Was an article that Paul McDonald provided numbers for with the BBC. The numbers were just outrageous for the Premier League compared to the other big leagues in Europe. So, yeah,
1.5 billion net. If I remember correctly, is how much the Premier League spent. Serie A was, I think, 60 million net. 60 million versus 1.5 billion. I bet France is probably around the same. Germany the same. Spain the same. It's yeah.
So the message there is just get out and support your local League of Ireland club. That's all I have to say. So thanks very much for your time, guys. And I'm sure Carlo could rant about Serie A for another hour. But if the listeners want that, they can find them over at the Italian Football Podcast. And you can find Robin and me, as always, on Football Transfers, as well as Carlo too. You've been listening to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com. If you liked what you heard, spread the word. Please follow, share and rate us. You can message us on Instagram, YouTube and Facebook at Transfers Podcast. Our Twitter, Blue Sky and TikTok address is at TransfersCast. I'm on Twitter at SwearMattPaul. Carlo is at Carlo Garganese and Robin is at Bairner. Our production is by Mark Caulfield at Pro Podcast Production and our music by Mark Caulfield and David L. Stay safe, be well and thank you for listening.
We did the transfer window. Ian McGarry, who left us and wasn't known for a couple of years. Duncan was old. Now he's back with a new show. It's called The Transfers. It's where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. Where everyone's gonna go. The transfers, the transfers, the transfers. Where everyone's gonna go. 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 Where everyone's gonna go.